annual conference. So every church sends delegates to the annual conference, which is for us the state of Indiana. And Amy spoke to that a little bit earlier. She's part of that for us. The cabinet is the bishop, and there are 10 districts in the annual conference, and they are called superintendents. And the bishop and the superintendents together, they do a lot of things, but the primary task that affects Wesley Chapel is they're the ones that decide what pastor goes to what church. So every year there are openings because you have pastors retire or pastors resign, and so they have to make sure those churches have pastors. And the other side is they have a group of pastors. They want to get them, make sure they're serving churches. And then Board of Ordained Ministry is part of what's important to this general conference. The Board of Ordained Ministry is a group of about 50 or 60 pastors and lay people. There's about 5 lay people, 50 to 55 pastors. And they're the ones who are responsible for the credentialing of pastors. So I'm a part of that. We also have a district committee on ministry that's under the Board of Ordained Ministry. Bill Amerson and I are a part of that as well. And so those are some of the things of how decisions are made, and these are the relevant pieces as we go into the legislation. Another piece is a jurisdictional conference. So jurisdictional conference elects bishops, and the funding for a jurisdiction is primarily done within the jurisdiction. So the money of Wesley Chapel primarily goes to our conference, our jurisdiction, and then globally. And that's every 4 years. So once again, Bill and I were members of that 4 years ago, and we elected 4 bishops. And there's the territory. It extends to the Dakotas, is the furthest west, and Ohio is the furthest east. Includes Michigan, Minnesota, and we got to say Wisconsin. Where's Jeremy? No whoop on Wisconsin? Oh, well. Go Green Bay, I guess. All right, so anyway, that's the jurisdiction. Then the next slide I have for you. Okay, then at the general conference level, there's the 3 branches. General conference is the legislative branch. And Book of Discipline we talked about. The Council of Bishops is the executive branch. We do not have a pope. So like the Roman Catholic Church has a pope, or the United States of America has a president, we have bishops. Council of Bishops. Judicial Council is a judicial branch, much and acts like the Supreme Court. So anything in the Book of Discipline that gets challenged out in the workings of the world can get challenged, and a decision can be made at the Judicial Council. So that's how decisions are made. And then the proposed plans, the special commission that I talked about brought 3 proposed plans. The traditionalist plan, which has since been modified, and it came after the special commission. The one church plan, the connectional plan, and then a plan that did not come from the special commission is called the simple plan, and I'll try to explain those as I go. So let's look at the one church plan first. This is a plan that's being endorsed by 2/3 of the bishops on the Council of Bishops, and it changes the definition of marriage. So it would be defined as a union between 2 persons or 2 adults. Pastors may perform same-sex weddings, but they're not required to. Churches may be allowed to have same-sex unions performed at their facilities, but they're not required to. And those practicing homosexuality may be ordained or serve as pastors, and then the criteria continues to be it's under the jurisdiction of the Board of Ordained Ministry of that particular conference. So that's the gist of the one church plan. I've got some other things in there as well, but that's just an overview. So then the traditionalist plan keeps everything as it is now, except for the last piece. So traditionalist plan, marriage is defined between one man and one woman. Pastors will not perform same-sex weddings. Churches are not allowed to have same-sex unions. Those practicing homosexuality will not be ordained or serve as pastors. So the traditionalist plan basically says what we already believe is what we're carrying forth, with one additional component, and it's increased accountability. And I can go into detail about what that accountability is if you'd like, and I'll give you time to ask that question if you want to. So then the connectional plan is a plan that does away with the jurisdiction. So we would no longer be part of a jurisdiction, and creates, instead of 5 jurisdictions all throughout the United States, which are geographical, will now create 3 jurisdictions called connectional conferences. And so each connection, I'll call it a connection because that's the language that would be, each connectional conference would be nationwide, and this is particularly the United States, and there would be 3, and one would be the traditional, basically the traditional plan would be proposed and agreed upon, and anyone that wants to be a part of that plan is in that connectional conference. I'm going to jump to number 3. So the progressive connectional conference. The simple plan is what I mentioned. The simple plan is something that does away with all negative language and basically requires every church to say you're going to be part of redefining the language, accepting homosexual marriages, as performing them, and accepting pastors who might be practicing gay or lesbian. That's a simple plan, and that looks like the Progressive Connectional Conference. So any church that wants to be a part of that would commit to that. And then the Unity Conference are those that don't feel comfortable going one way or another, and they're in the middle, and each church kind of is allowed to decide. And so you might have a pastor that believes one way and a church that believes another, but they might feel more comfortable in the Unity Connectional Conference. So that's the connectional plan. It will have the most difficulty of being passed because it would require constitutional amendments, which are much harder to pass. So let's just say, for example, the connectional plan passes at General Conference. It would not be the law of the United Methodist Church until each conference, or a majority, 2/3 of the conferences pass those as well. Two-thirds. Yeah. So really tough. So Indiana would have to say 2/3. We would have to vote it 2/3, and then 2/3 of the conferences. So it's multi-layered 2/3. And so it's really difficult to get the amendments passed on that piece, or the amendments changed. Okay, so that's a connectional plan, and then we go into table discussion, but it seems like you don't have near enough information to go into table discussion, especially if this is the first time you've heard these things. So I'll allow a few minutes if you want to ask me a question about that, about any of those plans. Steve? Yes. Yes, forecasting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what occurs if nothing is passed? Yes, that's an excellent question, and your prophecy, if we could call it that. So I'll restate the question. The question is, what if nothing is passed at the special session of General Conference? Then that means the 2016 Book of Discipline continues to carry us forward, which means that, self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not allowed to be pastors, and we are not allowed to perform those ceremonies, and the definition does not change. It also, the kind of the crisis we're in, and here's the current situation, we do have self-avowed practicing homosexuals who are pastors in our churches, and we have a bishop now who's a practicing homosexual. And the accountability piece is not strong enough to do anything about that. So that's really how we got to this dilemma. We have what we say we believe, and it's not being followed, and we don't have a strong enough accountability piece to make people follow that. And so if we don't pass anything, we will continue to have this tension, this crisis, this growing crisis. Bill, you want to speak to it? Continually have disobedience. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have a specific example. That's a great example, Bill. A specific example of someone who was disobedient to the discipline. That goes to the bishop. The bishop decides the consequences. The consequences was you have a one-day suspension. He was suspended a day, and then he or she was right back to being a pastor. So there's not consistency in what kind of discipline there is, and a bishop also has the authority to allow that complaint, and that's what happens. There's a complaint filed against a pastor who's not in compliance with the book of discipline, and if that goes to that bishop's desk, that bishop can hold that on that desk indefinitely. So there's nothing, in the accountability piece, there's nothing to really force the hand of a bishop to do anything if the bishop doesn't want to do anything. And so some of the increased accountability pieces are timelines, some consistency and penalties, and then another layer. For instance, right now, accountability is contained within jurisdictions. So right now, for instance, the Western jurisdiction, the bishops are the one who hold bishops accountable. And if there is no desire for the bishops to hold another bishop accountable, then disobedience continues. And so one of the levels of the traditionalist plan to increase accountability would be to form a global group of bishops who would see to those things. So disobedience can't continue in one local area. It can go up, and so increase accountability in that. So what you have is when you have a book of discipline and say we're all going to follow it, and not everybody follows it, then that just creates its own crisis. Mike, I think you're next. Okay, that's a great question. Are we basically acting like the one church plan now? I think the answer is yes, which is why the bishops are saying, hey, here's a plan. So what they've done is they've created a plan to make it mirror current operation. Wait a minute, Linda? Yes. So, yes. Yes. So Linda says, well, don't they, and pastors do as well, pastors and bishops, they take a vow to uphold the book of discipline. And so the response that they would have, Linda, would be, I'm upholding the parts of Book of Discipline, that I agree with, or there are parts of, and the Book of Discipline isn't a perfect document. There are parts of the Book of Discipline that are in tension with one another because it's changed every 4 years. So you've got something change in this part of the Book of Discipline, and then 8 years it's changed in this part of the discipline. It's not a cohesive document, and so a bishop will say, well, I am upholding this part of the Book of Discipline, and I don't have that right off the top of my head, but the inclusiveness part, they would say that the one thing I put up there, we are invested to work to be with and for all people, that we will do ministry with and for all people. All of a sudden that comes right up to the top and says, well, I'm doing that by including LGBTQ pastors. I'm working with and for all people. So they will say, I am complying with the Book of Discipline with that particular section. So that's where the tension is. Of course, the rest of us aren't buying it, but that's where it is. And we have bishops who are actually using that sentence for that purpose, and there we are. Mike, Linda, someone over here. Yeah, Steve. If we don't have accountability, change the law so we have, right, so we don't have to worry about it. Yeah. That would be a correct interpretation of the one church plan. Yes. Okay, Lois. Bless you. Yes. Yes. Yeah, what guarantees do we have? So if we increase the accountability and we have now a global group of bishops, what guarantees do we have that accountability would actually happen? Right now, the United Methodist Church is probably 65% traditionalist and 35%. So at some point, if that ever swings, then we'll be back in the same situation. I don't know if that'll happen or not. That's a what if. But it doesn't. I mean, so if you have a different thought on a different plan, I can write it into legislation. but I don't know what else. I don't know. Yeah, hypothetically, then what happens? Okay. Yeah. Here, let me just give you kind of the gist of 250 years of United Methodist Church history. There's been a high level of trust that the people who say, I will uphold the Book of Discipline, will actually uphold the Book of Discipline. And for 250 years, pastors and bishops have upheld the Book of Discipline. And over the last few years, they haven't. And so what we do not have in the United Methodist Church, because trust was what held us together, we don't have a police force. In the civil law, you break the law, there's someone there to enforce that law. And then once that person is there to enforce the law, then that person isn't automatically found guilty. Then they go through the process of going before a judge. So there's a due process. And there's a due process within the United Methodist Church, but there's no police force. So what happens is, and this is the way I understand the Book of Discipline is written, every member of the United Methodist Church is part of the police force. Any one of us can write a complaint against anybody else. You can write a complaint against me, and that can go to the Judicial Council, and they say, Pastor Tony violated 2702.2. And so that'll go to the Judicial Council. You get to write your review. I'd write my defense. We'd go there, and they'd say, because of this technicality or because of this Book of Discipline, you're right, so we're kicking Tony out. So we're our own police force. But that is just not happening the way it goes. And of course, it would go to the bishops, and then the bishops would take it. So just the whole procedure is not working. The accountability, I'll just take it all out. The accountability method is not working today. So that's where we're at. The police force are saying we're not arresting anybody. And the judge is saying I'm not convicting anybody. Yes, Mr. Police Officer.
If the connectional conference plan was adopted.
If connectional conference plan was adopted.
And you had your 3 or 4 of the simple plan. How's the money going to be divvied up? Because what if there's 2/3 are traditionalists?
How do the finances work? So let me tell you what I know about that. The finances would all be contained within the conferences themselves. So the traditionalist conference, those finances would be contained there, with one caveat there. So you have those 3 conferences, but the 3 of them would then support some general agencies. The Judicial Council. We'd only have 1 Judicial Council, not 3. We'd only have 1 Board of Global Mission, not 3. So some of those overall agencies. So that's why the connectional plan is very appealing. We don't have to break up the things that we are doing together globally. Pension, they don't need 3 pension plans. So some of those financial pieces stay the same, but as far as how we support, so the bishops within the connectional plan, all those bishops are supported by that group in that connectional conference. It's my understanding. I could be wrong.
So basically, the traditionalists wouldn't be required to fund
the progressive bishop.
Right.
That's correct. Right. Martha?
Well, and again, I know so little about this, but after hearing this with the accountability, that's so discouraging. If we had an option to do a graceful exit, and say we at Wesley wanted to do a graceful exit,
Mm-hmm.
and become independent.
The question of graceful exit, I'm going to address that in the next session, and we're going to have conversation on that, Martha. So I'm not.
What I was bringing
Yep.
it up was, could this not, I guess we need to bring it down to a grassroots level. Then could we form our own accountability group? You are accountable then to this committee for actions that.
Certainly. If we would have a graceful exit, one of the things that we would need to do as a church, if that's something that may be down the road for us, and that's a legitimate thing at a vision conference. What's the vision for Wesley Chapel? That's really why we're here. What would that look like? And I would say certainly we would want accountability pieces within Wesley Chapel. Yeah, certainly. Linda?
If the traditional plan goes through, then 2/3 of the bishops who support the one way, which I would say is the progressive plan, would they be replaced by bishops who were traditional?
Yeah, interesting. What bishops would stay bishops, and how would they be replaced, and who would be where and what? I don't have the answer to that, but that is a real fun thing to try to pursue. One more question. I think our lunch is ready. Okay, Jacqueline.
So this is just for the United States, but it will be voted on.
It will be voted on globally. Yeah, voted on globally. If those globally choose to vote. There's all other little interplays happening right now. Yeah, yeah. All right. You know, I think lunch is a great thing to have. And let's pray. And Melissa DeLuca is the one that's put this together. Gina's helped her, so be sure you thank them when you go through today. Let's pray.